Let me ask you about an issue that's coming up. The approval of science textbooks is
yes, sir,
in the not too distant future, and you may know this is a little controversial. There are people out there in the world who have a point of view about this, and one of the issues that's come up is whether or not the evolution piece of the science curriculum is going to be changed by the State Board of Ed. Is intelligent design going to be mandated for inclusion? Would you offer your point of view about that? Because as I've read things you've said, I haven't been able to get a clear perspective on what you believe with regard to what ought to be included in the science textbooks on evolution versus creationism, and what ought to be included with regard to intelligent design. I'm hoping you can clear that up right here.
Well, I thought I've been real consistent. I've never advocated it should put any kind of creationism or intelligent design in the textbooks. I think evolution, it's the consensus of the science community. It has to be taught. It should be taught. We want to make sure that the kids understand what they're going to face when they get to college. And there's just no debate about that. The debate comes on what has been referred to as teaching the strengths and weaknesses of a theory. We have a TEK called TEKS 3A, which I'd like to see remain, and it says any theory that is taught in a science classroom, you should teach the strengths and weaknesses. And evidently, that's where the controversy is.
Can you help me understand what some of the weaknesses in evolution are? I didn't take science past high school, but my memory is that it was pretty much based in fact, and there were not really any weaknesses.
Well, there's a lot of difficulties in evolution.
We have time. I'd like to hear what the weaknesses are.
Well, I'll bring up three that I think of at first. First of all, it's the fossil record. And the fossil record, to me, is a weakness, but it's also, the fact that I bring it up, it's also, I think, the strongest argument for evolution. If you give the billions of years of life on this planet, and you have fossils getting more and more complex the younger they get, then you have to make a conclusion. That's very strong evidence. Life has changed over time. So that's one of the strongest arguments for evolution. I think it's the strongest. Okay. In fact, I think that's the number one reason why it's so strongly held by most scientists today. I've read their books. I guess you've noticed I've read their books.
Where is the weakness, though, in that one?
There's gaps in the fossil record. There's big gaps. You would expect to see just an incredible number of transitional forms if life had evolved over time. So that's number one.
That's one.
And the other is what's called the Cambrian explosion, evolution's Big Bang, where, oh gosh, I forgot how many billions years ago, if it was 2 billion years ago, I don't remember. All of a sudden, every major phyla just showed up in a geographic instant. That's why they call it evolution's Big Bang. And it's a real serious problem for evolution. So the fossil record, I'd say that's one of the problems I see.
So those are two weaknesses that you would identify?
Well, the fossil record. The second one is just not enough time.
Right.
Life is so complex that the more we get into understanding the cells and how complex our cells, the little factories into the mitochondria, how the DNA is produced, how the proteins are produced from the DNA. It's incredibly complex. And for that to happen with just random chance and mutation, it's, I just don't, there's not enough time. And then one of the third things I think is a really serious problem for evolution, and it's not discussed that much, is the information. Where does all this new information, to design an eye, to design fingernails, teeth, okay? Where it takes information to design something, and where does that information come from if there's, they have it, the source for it is nothing. So those are some difficulties, serious difficulties.
Now, what you're advocating for is the teaching of these weaknesses that you've identified in your mind in class alongside the theory of evolution, what you refer to as the theory of evolution.
Well, I'm not for putting them in the state standards. See, right now we're in the process of establishing standards.
Right.
The standard, I'm perfectly content with the standard strengths and weaknesses.
Leave it as is right now.
Right.
You would not advocate the teaching of creationism, although you yourself believe.
But what's interesting is if you take Eugenie Scott. Are you familiar with Dr. Scott? She's the head of the National Center for Science Education. She's one of the leading advocates to promote evolution, science education, and she's one of the people that travels around, wherever the debates happen. So she'll show up this year, I would imagine. She's a very bright lady, and she was quoted in one of the newspaper articles where I was quoted, and she said, if they teach weaknesses, that's just a code word for putting in creationism, and a code word for putting in creationism is just teaching religion. So she's taken that if you put in a weakness to evolution, she says that's teaching religion, therefore you shouldn't be able to do it. Well, my gosh, she even proposed a standard, and one of them she proposed was, this is very interesting, she said the student will be expected to state why the Cambrian explosion is a problem for evolution. Well, I thought that's a pretty interesting standard. It doesn't sound religious to me, but I'm not even advocating for doing that, even though, she just gave that as an example, because it's certainly not religious.
Okay. What about the creationism piece? Will you advocate, or other members of the state board advocate, for introducing the teaching of creationism alongside evolution?
I don't see it.
You don't see it?
No.
Will you be a no vote personally on that?
I don't even think it'll come up for a vote.
But if it came up, would you vote no?
No. Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I would vote no.
Yes, you would oppose the teaching of, even though you yourself believe it,
Absolutely.
You would oppose it.
Right.
Why?
Well, there's lots of reasons. First of all, it doesn't have the consensus of science. You're going to have unnecessarily legal battles, and frankly, it's just not. It doesn't need to. If the books represent to me the difficulties of evolution like they ought to,
right,
that'll accomplish what I would like to see. I mean, but you know, the creationism, intelligent design. It's
same thing for intelligent design,
right,
by the way.
yeah,
you will not
right,
be a yes
no,
vote for the teaching of intelligent design in the public schools.
Not I.
So the people who are worried that as chairman you're actually trying to push this agenda through, they've got you wrong.
Absolutely.